Well, good day to you. It is Friday, January the 13th, and I hope wherever you are, you're having yourself a good one. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs if you're new, and welcome you back if you have been here before. But I always say this because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. If you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, take the extra steps and look into it. Investigate it for yourself. That's the only way you'll be able to see if there's any truth to this for yourself. I've included links in the description portion of every one of these videos because they take you to websites that I think give you the best background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom in some way. If you don't know anything about this information, check out the Share International site first, because there you will get pretty much everything you need to know. Now, if you want to join the discussion, post a comment, post your question in the comment section. You can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. You can also post a comment on Facebook. You can even share a post or two on Facebook if you want. But I do want to thank those people who did join the discussion since I put up a video yesterday. Brunoff, Reality Generator, Aunt Brad, which sparked a lot of discussion. And then you got Brian Gerard, Mark Hill, Aunt Brad again, Ricardo Pels-Wesley, and then some more comments from everybody. Rick Todd and Johnny Gregory. And then I also want to swing over to Facebook real quick because there were a couple of people who shared some posts. Is it Miriam Guerra? Am I pronouncing that right? And Ashwak Radati. You guys shared some posts. I do want to thank you as well. So keep them coming. Now I want to try to answer a question from Reality Generator. And this question is, what is your view on frequency vibration? Well, how deep do you want me to get with it? Because in truth, everything in life is vibrating on some kind of frequency. So, we could be here all night if we really want to. Now, from the quantum physics standpoint, we're just scratching the surface, really. And it will eventually revolutionize life on planet Earth for everyone the more we understand that truth about vibration and frequency. If you look at it from the quantum physics standpoint, it all kind of started, I think, with Einstein's theory of relativity, which when you talk to most people who know about the history about him coming up with that theory, E equals mc squared, or energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, they would say he discovered the theory of relativity, perhaps, or something like that. But he actually intuited it, according to the masters. It's an ancient mantra. And it's a truth. And when an individual understands that mantra and the purpose behind it and uses it correctly, they can do all sorts of things that would be quite extraordinary to somebody who didn't know it. So for instance, they can materialize things, they can create things with their mind, they can dematerialize things, they can think themselves from point A to point B, those kind of things. And this is what these masters do, because these masters, when I talk about these masters being masters of their own divinity, they're also masters of time and space, and they're also masters of not only the physical plane universe, but the astral planes, the mental planes, the spiritual planes, and the lower plane, from our perspective, all the planes, but from the higher levels, the lower planes, they're masters on that level. So when I talk about the many miracle signs that were put there by these masters, they are miracles to some degree, but from the master's point of view, it's a science. It's the science of thought that they're doing this. So when Maitreya made these pins disappear, and I talked about it in a story, he used that mantra, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, to dematerialize the pins, and then to rematerialize them, he used the same mantra. From my standpoint, I was like, wow, that's magic, or whatever, right? But from his standpoint, it was just everyday science. And it's just science that we don't know about yet. But all the miracles that are created, whether it's the Hindu milk miracle or the weeping icons, were all done by thought, by one of these masters. In fact, the UFOs, or the Space Brother vehicles and those kind of things, the flying saucers, those are created by thought too, actually. They are created on Mars in factories, but by thought. And then the Martians distribute those spacecraft to the humanity on other planets. And that's how they get around from point A to point B. But typically the Venusians don't build their own spacecraft, the Venusians do. So somewhere on that little flying saucer. It says "Made on Mars." I'm kidding. No, I always said it's like the Japan of the solar system. They're the mechanical builders in a lot of ways, but that they use thought to build those things too. They use thought to build the buildings that they live in. They use thought to build, and they use shapes and shape powers and those kind of things. And the understanding of shapes and design of cities will be based on frequency and vibration in the same way. Now, the other part of vibration would be a Maitreya experience that is a quite extraordinary Maitreya experience. Didn't happen to me, but I read about it in Share National magazine, and it happened to Benjamin Creme's own daughter. And I don't think it's a problem for me to talk about it because it was published in a magazine and for everybody to read. But she was walking through a park in London. I think it was Hyde Park. If it wasn't, it was a park in London somewhere. And Maitreya appeared to her as an elderly man, and approached her and started a conversation with her, and then asked her if it was okay if he walked and talked with her for a little while. She said sure. And through the course of this discussion, the thing that he said that was quite extraordinary, he started talking about energy. He said everything in life is energy, that vibration that you're talking about, right? And everything in energy is energy, and all that energy has its opposites. And then he kind of talked about it in a couple different ways that you might not be thinking about. He said, that's the reason why if you're having a bad year this year, who's to say that next year won't be the best year of your life? Everything has its opposites. So if you got COVID this year, probably next year you won't get COVID or something, maybe, or whatever. And he said, he even went on to say that suicide is a bad option because of that very truth. That right around the corner might be the best times of your life, and you'll deny yourself that if you end it for yourself. So no matter how trying your life is, no matter how difficult, no matter how desperate you might be at this time, for change, eventually it will change. And that's why despair is useless. You shouldn't despair. And I even talked about it in when I read an article from Benjamin Creme's master, The Joy of Living. He used the seasonal changes as a metaphor for how to live life joyfully. Because he said, just because it's the wintertime now and it's dark and cold and the flowers are gone and there's no leaves on the trees, well, eventually it starts to heat up a little bit. The leaves come out, the flowers come out, the birds come out, the days get longer, and you're no longer in the winter and now you're in the summertime. But if you're in the summer, well, guess what? It's eventually going to turn again and it's going to get cold again. And he, like I said, he used it as a metaphor, and that's why he said if you are in a state of despair, you're robbing yourself of joy, the joy of life. And that's why he said despair is useless. Same thing. But Maitreya, when he was talking to Benjamin Creme's daughter, he also said, he goes, relationships are the same way. That's why you could be in love with somebody this year, think they're the most great, fine, and wonderful person in the world, and the next year you're like, don't want to be around that guy or girl or whatever, right? Everything has its opposites. And then there was another thing, I wanted to talk about in terms of vibration is the rays. I don't talk about it very much because, I'm still learning it myself, really. But the master DK through Alice Bailey and even Benjamin Creme talk about the different types of rays. They say there's 7 rays throughout cosmos, and everything from an atom to a solar system is vibrating on one or other of these 7 rays. The first ray being the ray of will or power. The second ray is the love wisdom ray. The third ray is active intelligence. The fourth ray is harmony through conflict. The fifth is concrete science or mind. Sixth is abstract idealism or devotion. And the seventh ray is ceremonial magic and order. And individuals, as they start to become more advanced and getting closer and closer to being a master, start to really exemplify a lot of times the vices of a ray, but also the virtues of these rays. And so, like in terms of even countries, they're on, or what would be said to be on a certain ray. That's why they have different qualities to them. So like the United States has a second ray soul of love wisdom, but mainly manifesting the devotional aspect of the personality. And so one of the vices of the sixth ray, devotional ray, is self-deception. but also self-sacrifice is a virtue of that ray. But the only time that, according to the masters, that the United States manifested its soul quality was during the Marshall Plan. We talk about it as the principle of sharing, when the United States gave excesses of their resources to Western Europe to rebuild Western Europe. That was the only time that the United States, in the history of the United States, up until this point, has manifested the soul quality. Everything else has always been the personality quality. And the sixth ray can be, a little out there, but the other thing too I wanted to say about vibration and how to use it properly. I had a friend of mine who had not a Maitreya experience, but she sat next to the Master Jesus on a plane some years ago on the way out to San Francisco to Benjamin Creme's conference. And she was discussing with this person who ended up being Jesus, her disdain for the then president, George W. Bush, and how he was so stupid. She was saying to him, he was so stupid because he was, he wanted to go into Iraq and attack Afghanistan and how destructive it was. And he was just not a very intelligent speaker and very eloquent speaker and just seemed very stupid. And the Master Jesus asked her, he said, "Can I give you some advice?" And she said, "Yes." And he goes, "Imagine love around him." And she goes, "Love? Why would I imagine love around him? I need to imagine intelligence around him or something. He's so stupid, and he's so his stupidity is causing so much harm and destruction in the world and that kind of thing." And he goes, "Well, it is the love wisdom ray." But he went on to say, if you visualize love around someone, he goes, it's easier for people to change when they're surrounded by love. And I've done that many times in my life where I've had difficulty with coworkers or family or whatever, friends, and I visualize love around them, and it does change the person, and it does change my perception of them, and my relationship with them improves. So just a little tip from your Uncle Gary. But anyway, or actually from your big brother Jesus, actually. I'm just passing it on to you. But that's the other thing about vibration. But in terms of the rays, I wanted to say this too. If you ever get a chance to read one of Benjamin Creme's books, because he talks about the rays in great detail, but in Maitreya's Mission Volume 3, he talks about the rays in terms of the Renaissance painters and how the rays of their individuality, of their personality and of their soul, how it affected the quality and the way that they painted. So when you stand in front of Michelangelo, who was a very powerful first-ray soul, it has a different quality than the loving nature of Raphael. And if you stand in front of it in a museum, you can feel the energetic difference between the two based on their... You can even see it from an artistic standpoint. Their stroke is different. Very powerful, stroke of Michelangelo to a very soft kind of brush stroke from Raphael. And then if you look at the six-ray painters, he always said that the six-ray was the ray that cracked a nut with a sledgehammer. So, a lot of times the Renaissance painters that were just massive, these massive canvas paintings, were done by six-ray painters, where somebody like a seventh-ray painter would be very constrained and have a lot of order to it. But then he goes into the color of somebody like Paolo Veronese, who was a fourth-ray personality. I mean, it's just, when he talked about the artist in that way, it really can open up your mind to art, because these Renaissance painters were very, very, very advanced disciples. Many of them working consciously with the masters in their paintings and what they did and those kind of things. And they represent the possibility of art in the future in that way, where right now, today, the art that's going on pretty much is just kind of, but in the future, the art will be more like the Renaissance painters, very spiritual, but representative of the quality of the disciple who's painting it. So anyway, I suggest it's in the suggestive reading if you want to read something about the rays and vibrations in that way, reality generator. But those are just some of my thoughts on vibrations. So hopefully I didn't go too long-winded in it. But anyway, now let's get on to the next thing. In the last video I put up, I entitled it, "Don't Hate Me Because I Put Up Another Maitreya Video." Okay, so in my mind, like when I put these videos up, okay, I try to think of a catchy title and not have it be the same kind of title over and over and over again. So I just thought of, kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of, don't hate me because I put up another video. So in my mind, I heard a voice and it was funny to me, and I put it in as a title, and it did not translate at all. So some people thought that I was thinking I was thinking that people were hating me. I was thinking maybe people were hating me for putting videos up. That had nothing to do with it. It was almost kind of like, when somebody says, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. I was just thinking of something different. It did not go over very well. And so there's a guy named Aunt Brad who, he's commented on my titles. I don't know if he necessarily listens to the video. He might. I don't know. I doubt it. But anyway, he said one of the sweetest things that he's ever said to me, if not the sweetest thing. He goes, hey, it's been a while. Your title is strange as I can't think of anyone hating you for posting a video. And believe me when I tell you this is the nicest, sweetest thing that this man has ever said to me. However, there's a however. I could understand people being annoyed at you for your deception. Okay, there you go. You are using an image of Jesus while your videos are about Maitreya. This is deception, and we are warned by Jesus of those who will set out to deceive. Okay. And that sparked a lot of conversation. And I have to say, he's sparked conversation before. So he's got this quality about him when he says something. I know he doesn't agree with what I have to say, and that's fine. But I wanted to say this about devotion, because I just got through talking about the rays in some way. The devotee or the mystic or the zealot, maybe somebody who's into ideology and those kind of things, is really coming from the sixth ray of abstract idealism or devotion. That's that quality. And it's a divine quality, but because it's humanity and we're talking about humanity, it's not always the virtue of that ray, it's the vice of the ray. And the devotee, what the devotee is missing, I think, is that their devotion is to the individual that they're devoted to and the ideal that they have of that person. They put him up on a pedestal, perhaps, think he's God himself, perhaps. And it's not just Christians' view of Jesus. It could be, Muslims' view of Muhammad, maybe Buddhist view of Buddha and that kind of thing. But I've even seen it in groups that put out the information about Maitreya. They put Maitreya up on that pedestal, or even Ben, and are devoted to both Ben and Maitreya in that way. And Maitreya says he doesn't come to seek devotees or followers. He even said, don't follow anyone, not even him. You know what I'm saying? Because once you follow him or chase after him, you've already lost him, is what he said. And you lose yourself in the same way. But the thing that I always want to point out, and I pointed this out before, this is actually, I really started thinking more about this after hearing a Bill Maher video, but he talked about the different types of Jesuses, and he kind of jokingly said, well, small businessman Jesus from Galilee, who said, give to thy rich so that the wealth will trickle down to the poor, that kind of thing. But if you think about it, there is just a billion different views of Jesus. They're not all the same. There might be some things that they agree upon, but, for the most part, everybody has their own view of Jesus. And Maitreya says, as man so relates to man, does man relate to God. And if you were to take it back before Christianity, came about, and went back to early or prehistoric humanity, when they started to think about the Creator, their Creator was a creation of who they were, which was warriors, hunters, gatherers. And their God was, and they prayed to their God for a good feast or a good hunt or to win the battle and those kind of things. And as times changed and man's perception of themselves changed and their man's perception of each other changed, well, therefore God started to change. And as time went on, God became very individualistic, because people became more individualistic. And then somebody like Jesus comes on the scene, and his God was love, which was much different than what the Jewish God was like, the God Jehovah, which didn't really talk about love in that way. God was a very vengeful creature. You have to fear God. But Jesus didn't talk about God in that way. He talked about God as love. But that's because that's who he was. The highest manifestation of love in a perfected, as they put it, it's the first time in human history, love in its perfection in humanity was when Jesus was in Palestine. So therefore God was love. You know what I'm saying? But yet then the devotion came into play. People put Jesus up on this pedestal as God. And as the person lives their life, they see Jesus as they see life. So if they're a critical person, guess what? Jesus is very critical. If they're more laid back, perhaps more accepting of other people's beliefs, well, then Jesus is a little more laid back and more accepting. But everybody has a different view of Jesus. And in the end, it really is who you are. You're almost worshiping yourself in that way. But there's a black Jesus. I brought this up before. There's a, Semitic Jesus. There is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. There is a Jesus that supports everything that's neo-Nazi, because the Nazis were actually considered themselves to be good Christians, but yet, they were supportive of the extermination of the Jews and the taking over the world. Their Jesus supported that. To looking at people in the United States who are very capitalistic, very individualistic, America First policies, well, Jesus supports that. Jesus supports the Second Amendment because that's what they believe to be, the truth of life in America. God bless America. God bless all 50 states, and that blessing stops right at the Rio Grande River and right just north of Minnesota. And, between the two oceans, that's where that blessing stops. Not the rest of the world, that's it. And that's God's country, is the United States. That's what these people believe, but it's all who they are. If you're more of a universal person, such as myself, who looks at the world as one family, well, then God supports that. Is it true? It might not be any more true than the view of the neo-Nazi Jesus. I don't know, but it's the way I relate to people. You know what I'm saying? That's my Jesus. But the devotee loses sight in what the teacher's message is. And that's what I think Maitreya says, is when you chase after him, you've already lost him. Because that's not really the most important thing, Maitreya the personality. It's his message. It's the teachings of Jesus. But the devotee thinks and believes that just because I believe it, then therefore it's true. If I believe myself to be a good Christian, I don't have to put any work or effort into it. It's already done. I go to church every Sunday, and because of that, I'm a good Christian. Now, the other 6.5 days a week, I can be just as most miserable person on the planet. You know what I'm saying? And that's okay. I'm going to heaven because I believe in Jesus and I go to church every Sunday. Is that really what it was about? Or is it about living of the principles? So when Jesus said, I am the truth, I am the light, I am the way, was he talking about himself personally? Or was he talking about the teachings that he had to give? I think he was talking about his teachings. But that's my belief on it. But I don't go around beating people over the head that don't believe what I believe. You know what I'm saying? I always put my mother into the mix on this. She's a Methodist, and she was dyed-in-the-wool Methodist. And she is very tolerant of other people's beliefs. Her Jesus is very tolerant of other people's beliefs. But she believes in Jesus just as much as you do, Aunt Brad. You know what I'm saying? But it's a different Jesus. So, to a very great extent, the devotee is devoted to themselves. But when Jesus said, and I've talked about unity. Okay, this is another example, and I'll kind of end it with this. Talk about unity and oneness, and people say that that's coming from Satan. That's satanic, verbiage, oneness. That there is no oneness. It's, we're all separate. I mean, I've had people comment on my channel about this. Jesus talked about oneness, but he didn't use those words. He talked about it, though, the truth about oneness. I'll give you an example. When Jesus said to his disciples, when I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. And the disciples turned to him and said, when were you hungry? When were you thirsty? When were you in prison? What did he say? What did Jesus say? If you do it to the least of my brethren, you've done it to me. How is that not a teaching about oneness? Jesus loved everyone. He had no enemies. And I've had people say, well, he's going to come back and smite his enemies. Jesus, when he was on the cross, loved the people who put him to death, just as much as he loved Peter, John, and James, his closest disciples. He loved them just like that. You know, he talked about the law of cause and effect. What you sow shall you reap. Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. Those truths would not be true if we lived in a world that was separate. There's no way. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to end it now because I'm going a little long-winded. Aunt Brad, I'm sure you're not listening to this, but if you are, I want to thank you for your comment because it definitely got me thinking. And every time you've commented, you always get me thinking, get me talking. So I really do appreciate everybody that's commented. I love you guys. Take care. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon. And I can't wait to put up another video. Take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.